What's up, my Wizards Dev? From SBMTG on the YouTube.com, I like magic, and today we got 10 more Kaladesh spoilers on what I believe is the penultimate day of spoilers. Tomorrow, Friday morning, in case you're keeping score, I believe they're going to spoil the entire rest of the set, which is like 90 cards. They like to do that. Most of it will be, draft, limited fodder, but they like to put in a couple of good things, so stay tuned for that. But I want to talk about the spoilers from today because there's a few things that are easy to run through. There's some stuff I want to talk about, and there's a couple of cards that are just straight up tough to evaluate. So let's take a look. First of all, Chief of the Foundry's back. Chief of the Foundry, everybody. I've seen a couple of people in the comments be like, man, it sucks Chief of the Foundry's rotating. Well, here it is. It's right here. So that's really, really awesome to have you back, buddy. Glad to see you. You're cool. Here's Foundry Inspector right here, though. He's 3 generic mana for an artifact creature construct. He's a 3/2, and artifact spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Now, I could talk about this face 50, but my actual reaction to this just boils down to yes! 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 This is Workshop Assistant right here. I could talk more about Inspector. He's obviously awesome, but Workshop Assistant is 3 generic for an artifact creature construct. He's a 1/2, and when he dies, return another target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. Well, this is reminiscent of Dutiful Attendant, but it just says artifacts instead of creatures, basically. So I believe it has the same power and toughness and everything. And in draft, this is going to be very, very good. I like that it's at the common level, too, so you'll see a couple of them, very likely. So I do think the card has a lot of limited applications. It's obviously awesome in this environment. Whether it sees play outside of that, I really doubt. Although, again, Pauper could definitely make use of something like this. I'm just not sure if 3 is a little prohibitive, although remains to be seen. I just don't think this is going to see, real big league like standard or modern play, obviously. And the last thing that I will just talk to you through the use of graphic is Self-Assembler. It's 5 generic mana for a 4/4 artifact creature assembly worker. When Self-Assembler enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an assembly worker creature card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library. So this is, a lot of people are saying this is like the new Squadron Hawk. If it is, it's a very fixed Squadron Hawk. And do remember that in limited environments, that if you get more than 4 copies of a card, whether it's sealed or draft, you can play more than 4 copies of a card in those formats. So if you get like 6 of these, it's entirely possible to play them in limited, but in standard, obviously, you're stuck at 4. And I just don't think it's going to go anywhere in a real constructed environment. Even though people say like, hey, Squadron Hawk, it's not. In no way is it that. So let's take a look now at a couple of cards that I actually want to talk to you about for a second. A second meaning a couple of minutes. This is Era of Innovation. It's 2 mana, a generic and a blue for an enchantment. Whenever an artifact or creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 1 generic. If you do, you get 2 energy counters. And you can pay 6 energy and sacrifice Era of Innovation to draw 3 cards. This is a frustrating card to evaluate, honestly, because on the one hand, it's kind of like 5 mana for 3 cards, which isn't great, but on the other hand, there are many different ways of making energy in the format. This is an enchantment in the graveyard for Delirium decks. They may want that, possibly. So there are also pros, but there are also cons, Do you really want to spend 2 mana in a constructed format, use up an entire turn early game, basically to play this and then pay more mana for it as you move through your curve? I don't know if you want to do that either. You got to play a deck that has artifacts and creatures in it, or other ways of producing energy. I'm not sure if Control is going to do any of that. And Control might play some artifacts. But all in all, I think this is, again, a good limited piece. This environment's going to facilitate this card, I think, very well. This environment looks like it could be fast, yes, but if you're building like the blue-black artifacts deck in limited, this will almost certainly go in. But outside of limited, I'm just not really sure. It obviously has practical applications in a control deck or something, but at the same time, it just looks a little awkward, all things considered. So let me know how you guys feel about this one. A lot of people are saying it's great. A lot of people are saying it's garbage, and I see the arguments from both sides. We're actually going to talk about a couple of cards like that today where I see both sides of the argument, and it's hard to make a hardline call on it. If I had to make a real call on it, I would say this is probably not going to see real constructed play, but be a limited powerhouse. But again, could be wrong. Yes, it works with clues, but I don't know if that's going to take it all the way. Here is another card that a lot of people are saying is garbage and a lot of people are saying is good. This is Insidious Will right here, Wedge's spoiler from the Mana Source this season. This is 4 mana, 2 generic, and 2 blue for an instant. You choose one and you counter target spell. You may choose new targets for target spell or copy target instant or sorcery spell, you may choose new targets for the copy. Okay, so again, a lot of people are like, this is bad. 4-mana counters are just bad, period. And that's, first of all, that's not true. Like, Summary Dismissal has seen some, 3 of sideboard play and 1 of standard play already, so they're not just definitely bad. There's also Cryptic Command, which no, this is not Cryptic Command, but still 4-mana counterspell. They're sometimes good. Some people are saying this is very good, actually, in standard control, especially with how slow the format is looking to be. Although I'm not sure, again, if that's a true statement, because the vehicles deck looks very fast. Mono White Humans looks okay right now. The equipments deck looks really fast. Not sure if it's going to make it, but it does look really fast. We're losing Languish in the format, and that could, help aggro out a great deal. So I know I'm babbling a little bit about this card, but I really want to talk about the different pros and cons. But the con side of the argument just basically boils down to 4-mana counterspells are bad. And that has not proven to necessarily be the case in formats of old. The pro side of the argument is that this card does a lot of things Control wants to do, and I ultimately agree with that. So, bad counterspell? I don't think so. 4 of counterspell? Probably not. I think we're looking at 1 to 2 copies in a main deck. And Control does look to be okay, because it got its replacement for Languish today. And no, it's not 4 mana. It costs 5, but I do think it will end up being the best 5 mana mass removal in the format, and Control will play it. So we'll look at that in just a second. But I do think, ultimately, that this card is probably good. I think there's like a 70% chance that we'll see this card in Constructed. This is Master of Marionettes, though. It's 6 mana, 4 generic, and 2 black. For a Human Artificer, it's a 1/3 with Fabricate 3. And whenever an artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, target opponent loses life equal to Master of Marionette's power. So you look at this a couple of ways, You can either put this into play and give it 4 power, and whenever an artifact goes to the graveyard, your opponent will lose 4. That seems pretty good right there. Or you can spread the love a little bit, get a couple of, 3 1/1 dudes, plus this guy, and whenever an artifact goes to the graveyard, they lose 1 life. So versatility, again, key on this. I like that this does a couple of different things. And I should point out, by the way, that yes, like if the servos die, they do touch the graveyard, so your opponent will be losing life. So that's not terrible, although this does look sort of intro packy at its core. If they were still doing intro packs, this might be the black rare. And it teaches us about Fabricate and all that. So it looks intro packy, although I do like the ramifications of it. I feel like they may have priced it out of doing anything real, although we do have Cryptolith Right in this format, so there's always a chance, right? I mean, you can play this pretty early with Right. But again, I'm just not sure that it's going to be worth it. Maybe an Artifact Aristocrats build that also uses like Zulaport Cutthroat. Something, and I'm going to try and make that work. But ultimately, I feel like this card is way priced out. Here's Fairgrounds Warden. It's 3 mana, 2 generic, and a white for a 1/3 dwarf soldier. When Fairgrounds Warden enters the battlefield, exile target creature an opponent controls until Fairgrounds Warden leaves the battlefield. I have traditionally really liked creatures like this. I like Banisher Priest, I like Fiend Hunter, although I do think Fiend Hunter is the ultimate king of creatures like this because you can exile the creature forever if you stack the triggers correctly, basically. So that will just always be the tippy top. This is still worded like Banisher Priest to where it gets around that. You can't, through verbiage and wizard use of the rules, exile the creature forever. You can't do that. But as far as, comparing this to Banisher Priest, sure, Banisher Priest attacks a little bit better. But this has Fiend Hunter's PT, meaning it'll stick around a lot longer. You can't, it can't be shocked. It can't be dealt 2 damage by burn. Can't be twin bolted, whatever. So that's also good. And it's easier to cast than either of the other 2 cards. Much more splashable, which will have a lot of implications in a limited environment. Whether this sees standard play, I'm not 100% sure, but cards like this absolutely can. So I would not put it past it. I am a fan. Here's Syndicate Trafficker right here. It's 2 mana, a generic, and a black. For an Aetherborn Rogue, it's a 3/1. And you can pay 1 generic and sacrifice an artifact to put a +1/+1 counter on Syndicate Trafficker. It gains indestructible until end of turn. Well, this works pretty well with creatures that have Fabricate stuff. It works pretty well with Scrap Heap Scrounger, too. We just spoiled that card the other day. All in all, this looks pretty good, man. 2 mana, 3 power guy, not terrible. Not usually terrible. I love the art, but aside from that, the actual functionality of the card, let's talk about that for a second. Yes, this is another thing for the black-based artifacts deck, but it's starting to look harder and harder to figure out how we're supposed to put all of these different pieces together. I do like that this guy can both protect himself from removal and pump at the same time, a perma pump too, +1/+1 counter. But you have to temper that with the fact that right now Grasp of Darkness and Declaration in Stone and Anguished Unmaking, these are all very, very popular pieces of removal in this format, and all of them get around his indestructibility. And yeah, you could pump him up past the Grasp of Darkness, but that's really, really hard to do. 4 different pumps on him. But, you know, 1 generic mana is not too much to ask. Sacrificing an artifact, maybe. I like that you can sacrifice artifact creatures, obviously, and there are multiple ways of bringing those back. So, all in all, I think the card has a lot of playability to it, just will it find the right home? And I've asked that question so many times lately that all these cards will probably find some kind of home. It's kind of exciting, because there's a lot of, you know, build space here, and like, I like it because it sort of works into the flavor, you know, we see all these weird cards, and we gotta figure out how to assemble the working parts and make these decks work, you know? So it sort of plays into the whole theme of invention and ingenuity and making stuff, you know? And putting together a bunch of parts to make something more than the sum of the parts. So that's always Magic, right? But I really think they've nailed it with the design of this set. I mean, it's got a lot of players being like, what? I like that. And this card is just something to add to that. You know, it's obviously, functionally, a good card. It can pump itself at instant speed while protecting itself at instant speed. That's really, really good. But what does it fit into? So, do think the card is good and probably will find some sort of shell. I just think there's so much more to come both in this and Aether Revolt that some of these cards may have to wait a minute before they get truly viable. But this is one of my favorite cards of the day. This is Fumigate, right here. It's 5 mana, that's 3 generic and 2 white for a sorcery. Destroy all creatures. You gain 1 life for each creature destroyed this way. So by the way, just based on the art and the flavor text, this is how the Inventor's Fair ends. They fumigate the place with a giant airship. And that's horrifying, right? I'm not sure why with that flavor you'd gain 1 life for each one. Maybe because you're killing all the gremlins. Who knows? Flavor's fun sometimes, but functionality, again, is what's important. And this, I think, may be one of the best 5 mana kill everything spells I've ever seen, honestly. In Standard, I do think that there is a decision between this and Planar Outburst, because Planar Outburst will get control decks. A creature, you know, Planar Outburst can sometimes function as both a board wipe and a finisher, which is really good. But this, on the other hand, is awesome against both aggro and especially tokens-based builds. Ridiculous against tokens. Because sometimes, you know, you'll hit your Languish on turn 4, but they'll have left you at a very, very low life total, you know. Something that's going to be very hard to crawl back from. You can play your Languish, but they can set right back up and hit you for the next, you know, 8 or 10 damage that they need to win the game. With this, you wait one more turn, but you put yourself in a much better position after you wipe the board. Even if you only kill 4 guys, gaining 4 life, even if you only kill 3 guys or something, gaining 3 life is actually really, really good for control, getting them back into the game. So I am a huge, huge fan of this, and I know a lot of people are saying it's bad. Some people are saying that it's just straight up boring. But again, I don't care if a card is boring if the functionality is good. And in decks that want something like this, i.e. again, control, blue-white control looking better every day, maybe an Esper control, you know. But in a control deck, they want this all day, especially, again, if you're against a wide board of tokens. It doesn't matter that they still have their Nissas and their Gideons out. It'll help you. It won't help you that they have their Nissas and Gideons out. This will help you a lot, because sure, they can set right back up the next turn, get a couple of tokens out there, but you just gain like 4 or 5 life or more a lot of the times. So sure, they get to set right back up, but you get the extra couple of turns that you need to help, you know, turn the corner and put the game in your own favor. So I like this card a lot, if you can't tell, and I think it's going to be very important. But that's all I've got for now, at least. Who knows, they may slip in a couple of more a little bit later on tonight. But again, it's from what I understand, tomorrow is the big day. We'll get the rest of the set, and then pre-release is next week. So we'll be there for you, and not only will we review the stuff that's spoiled tomorrow, we'll probably do like a top 25 spoiled cards, something like that, because the rest will be like, you know, commons, draft fodder and stuff. But we'll get to brewing. I'm already working on a couple of things, most of which are Boros. I'm working on big Boros, which is a lot of really expensive stuff, casting cost-wise. I'm working on 2 different Boros aggro decks, equipments, and vehicles. So I got a lot of Boros. I'm also working on some control decks, Esper and Blue-White. Already talked about that. I'm working on Mardu, Grixis. So I'm working on a bunch of stuff right now. Let me know all the stuff you want to see, and I will get to it. It is brewing season, ladies and gentlemen, and I couldn't be happier. So I will see you guys next time. If you enjoyed the content, like it, share it and comment on it. I want to know where I screwed up, what I missed, all that. And if you like a card I liked, you can also tell me that. That'd be nice of you. And I'll see you guys later. I'm Dev from SBMTG. Thanks for watching, my wizards.